So I don't usually make videos like this, or I think this might actually be the first time. But with the EOS coming soon, I thought it'd be a good time to take a trip down memory lane and go over some of the thoughts I had about the game. And sorry about the sniffing if you hear it. I'll do my best to edit it out, but yeah, I'm a bit sick right now. So yeah, let's get into it. So I've made this little timeline here that shows my own personal journey through this game. So at global launch, I joined a random guild at the time. Didn't really care what it was, but it's mainly to get a feel for what Colosseum was like. And after the announcement of GC, I looked into an actual proper guild. And that was when I joined Fatalis, which was Destiny X at the time. And I ended up staying there all the way until it's the 30th of November 2021 when it boomed. And along the way, I also started recording GC matches starting from the 4th Grand Colosseum, which was on the 15th of November 2020. And on the 26th of January, there's also the Project Fusion, which was the Asia and NAEU server merge. Heard a bunch of people lost accounts during that time, and pretty chaotic. Then when Fatalis boomed, I went over to Ecstasy, which was a top 200 guild at the time. That was also the time when joining VC or voice chat became required, and so I ended up joining as one of those mute guys that never spoke, so that was fun. Then after that, it was announced that TS1, 2, and 11 would no longer have GC. So I was pretty damn pissed about that because I was basically a pure TS1 player. So our guild ended up moving over to TS13 early on to get a feel for how GC was in that time slot. That was GC 19, I believe. I remember we also lost some members because of the time slot move, so that was pretty unfortunate. Then after GC 22, Ecstasy boomed and I ended up joining Clusin on the 2nd of June 2021. That's also where I am right now, and so I've basically been here for about over a year now. And aside from that, I also had an old Minstrel, which I originally had in TS13, but then it died, and then they brought it back to life in TS10, and then it died again, and now it's back to TS12, where it's still pretty much dead. Anyway, that's pretty much my background in the game, and so moving on, I'll just talk about some of the thoughts I have regarding EOS. So when EOS was first announced, obviously a bunch of videos popped up talking about it, and I watched a few, and I ended up leaving one of these comments which summed up my thoughts, which I'll show on the screen here. Basically, the main draw of Sinoalis, or the main focus, was the Guild vs Guild, the GVG, where it's real time and everyone is here at the same time fighting together. And the rest of the game is basically just collecting resources to improve yourself so you can contribute more in this Guild vs Guild battle. But some people might say, the character's interesting, so they're playing the game for the character, or maybe the main story is why they're playing. But to me, I don't feel particularly attached to any of those characters, and the main story is honestly not that interesting to me. It's basically just the characters killing each other, to revive the authors. But it's like, I don't really care about that, Since I don't even care about the characters, why would I care what they do? But on the other hand, some of the event stories can be interesting, like, say for example, the ones about nightmares and the current one about Recon. Another thing that I found interesting was that we are very rarely part of the story. Usually the stories focus on following one of the characters around as the protagonist. It's kind of like a short story you pick up and read in your free time. Not too long, but not too short, but had some interesting concepts. But there are actually a few cases where we are actually part of the story. And by that, I mean that the puppets actually acknowledge your existence. And they actually talk to us and tell us to do things. So I remember there are 4 events where this happened. There was the Illusionary Shangri-La, the Ugly Dragon, Fraught Cuisine, and Divas Descant. And it's just one of those things that stuck in my mind because in Sinoalis, we've had 0 presence in the story with the exception of those event stories. So when I saw those stories, I thought that we might play a bigger part in the game later on. But I guess it never happened in the end. Or maybe I was just overthinking things. But as I was saying before, the main focus of this game to me is the GVG, which comes in the form of Daily Coliseum and the monthly GC events. And with the Daily Coliseum, you don't really get many rewards for participating. So it's basically just some charm medals and some nightmare upgrade tablets. And in the first place, the charm medal exchange, it doesn't even have anything that's that valuable in it. Like, other than the monthly TC and the evolution materials, there's nothing that's worth exchanging. And on top of that, you can also get charm medals from futtering weapons anyway. So there's not really much reason to play Daily Coli in the first place. And the gameplay ain't exactly the most exciting thing. I mean, it's just you log in and come in and tap weapons for a full 20 minutes until it's over. But honestly, I think the biggest problem is that no one feels like playing anyway. So even if you want to play and you log in, when you see the opponent guild is just dead, not even playing in sight, you lose motivation to play anyway. And on top of that, EOS has been memed by the community since like forever. Even a quick search on Discord shows that EOS has been used over 8k times. And if you compare it with Princess Connect, which already hit EOS for global, that's even more than what they had. And I think most of us can agree that Princess Connect was a lot more popular and had more players than Sinoalis did. I mean, like, sure, we've got a few champions of EOS in our server, but it's too impressive how many times EOS has been mentioned in the Discord. And I think that says a lot about what people think of the game. Like, I remember back when I first started, I used to come to Daily Coliseum every day, even if it was an official rest day for the guild. And I guess part of the reason that kept me coming back every day was because I was a cleric, and as a healer I can just keep the BGs alive, and that makes a pretty big difference over the course of Coliseum. And that's compared to something like a minstrel, where if you hit 20 buffs, you got nothing to do anymore, so you just slack. And then as a Sorc, your job basically depends on whether the opponent's minstrels are playing or not, because if they're not playing, then you've got nothing to debuff. And then on top of that, even if the opponent guild is playing, if your guild isn't playing, then there's no point either, because you'll just be getting shipped over and over again. So the whole Coliseum basically revolves around everyone being active and playing. If the opponent guild members aren't actually playing, then you've lost your reason to play as well. And it just kind of turns into a negative cycle. Anyway, moving on, the other thing I wanted to talk about was the little projects I've worked on over the past year or so. The first one is that nightmare planning tool, which is basically collecting dust in the back based on the Google Analytics. And honestly, I guess there's not much to say about it. All it was just scraping the Sinoalis TV website for the nightmares and just plotting them onto a timeline. Although I did modify it to use the GitHub data mines instead of the Sinoalis TV website later on. And that was just because the Sinoalis TV website stopped being updated for the global version. And that's something that I never would have noticed if someone didn't ask me about why nightmares weren't being updated anymore. But honestly, more than anything, I was just surprised that people were still using it, since the UI wasn't the best, and it was pretty bad on mobile. And the second project I wanted to talk about was the Sinnoh Tracker. I was actually debating whether to bring it up or not, but since the game's gone EOS anyway, I figured it doesn't really matter anymore. So yeah, if you've used it, it's basically just a list of guilds, a bunch of statistics, and a GC match predictor. I actually also considered creating a player ranking list based on player CP, but since some players are always on their combo set, it's hard to find their real CP. So even if I did create a ranking list, it wouldn't be a very accurate one in the first place. So I never ended up making it on the website, but I did have the SQL queries for the database ready. I mean, hell, I could probably post a ranking list on Straight right now. Anyway, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, but the only thing that's kind of sad is that it didn't last very long before the game hit EOS. And there's actually still a bug with the last updated time on the GC match predictor page, which is related to how the GC rankings for each time slot aren't updated at the same time every day. So basically, the time the server GC rankings update is variable, but the time I've set it to pull the data is fixed. So the rankings might not be updated at the time I pull the data from the server, but the last updated time on the page will still change. It's actually not a huge problem right now because when I pull the rankings, I do a comparison with the previous day's rankings, and if they're the same, then it means it has not updated, so I'll basically schedule a new update in 10 minutes. So the only time this might affect people is when the server-side rankings are updated later than usual, and if you refresh the page in between those times, in which case you'll just see the old rankings even though the last updated time has changed. It just means the rankings might be inaccurate for those people who are stalking the page. But yeah, I was originally planning to fix it, but since EOS was announced, I figured, yeah, I don't feel like doing this anymore. So yeah, I'll probably make the repositories public once the game hits EOS, since there's no point in leaving it private when it's all over. And who knows, maybe someone will find it useful, maybe. The code's actually pretty messy back there. Anyway, that's basically all I wanted to say. I've heard some people are moving over to the JP server, but as for me, I'll be calling it quits here. It's been a long journey. Colosseum was fun at the start, but it did get stale over time and just kind of died off towards the end. And it's just sad how we've lost so many people over the past 3 years. I remember back when the Discord channels used to be split into the NA and Asia channels. Used to be so active back then, but nowadays, it's all just EOS and off-topic stuff. Anyway, after this I'll just post the last few GC matches and I'll be on my way. See you guys in another gacha one day.